So today's going to be quite a fun video, where I finally get around to upgrading all the speakers in my living room to brand new ones. Currently in my living room I've got a set of fairly old speakers that I bought secondhand many years ago. All my satellite speakers are Mordaunt shorts, the satellites are the MS302s, and the centre speaker is an MS304. And while they are quite good, my main issue with them is that they're very much home cinema satellite speakers, so they only go down to about 100Hz, and therefore the subwoofer has to take over a lot of the lows. And up until very recently, in my last video in fact, my subwoofer was a very old Tannoy EFX, and it wasn't very good at all. So my plan here is that in my last video I got a new subwoofer, so if you want to see that, check that one out. And my plan in this video is to replace all the satellite ones with much higher end new ones, including a set of front speakers that are full range. Therefore the subwoofer will not have to do nearly as much work for just general music listening. So these are the speakers I've bought. Let's take a look at them. So I went for 3 different sets of speakers here. I decided to go for the Monitor Audio Bronze line. This is the brand new 6th generation that they brought out, that they only brought out in 2020. So it's a very new line, but they just look amazing. So I will admit I went for them mostly because of the looks, but of course the performance is also really good. Monitor Audio is a British brand, so I don't know how widely available they are worldwide, but they are very well established and a very reputable brand. They've got a set of different lines of speakers. They start off at the lowest end with the Monitor line, then they go bronze, silver and gold. They've then got a couple of others that are like very much home cinema based, where it's like a package of speakers you'd buy for home cinema and things like that. But in terms of their general speakers, that's the 4 lines you've generally got. So bronze, that's their second lowest end, so it's still a fairly entry-level product line, but given the gold speakers cost an absolute fortune, they're extremely high-end, the bronze line are still very good. I did consider the Monitor line, but the reason I didn't go for those is partially just because I wasn't a fan of the colour of the speaker cones. They were sort of gold colour, I didn't really like that. I preferred the silver ones in these. And they didn't really have a good option for surround speakers. And then the only bookshelf speakers they had for the fronts were the Monitor 100s, which were a bit too big. So the bronze line just seemed to fit better. So here's what I went for. For my front speakers, I went for the Bronze 50s. These are standard 5-inch bookshelf speakers, so they should be really good for front speakers. For the centre speaker, I went for the C150, that's just their standard centre speaker in this line. And for the surround speakers, I decided to go for the Bronze FX. These are designed to be surround speakers, and what I'm hoping with these is they'll have quite a wide dispersion pattern, so that when I hear sound coming from behind me, I won't be able to perceive where the speaker is. Because with my current speakers, I've just got bookshelves behind me as well, and because they're quite directional, you can very easily tell there's a speaker there. So hopefully these will sound better for that as well. So what I'll do is I'll go through each box individually and unbox it, and then take just or 2 of each speaker individually. So what I'll do is I'll put the chapter timestamps in the seek bar on YouTube and as well as in the description, so you can skip to the specific speaker you're interested in. I'll then go away, set them all up in my living room, install them all. I'll be wall mounting all of these, and then I'll come back with a sort of just review. So yeah, let's get into these. So the first ones we're going to look at are the Bronze 50s, which I'll be using as my front channels. These cost around £259, and with these speakers generally the pricing is the same no matter what retailer you go for. So unless one of the retailers has a specific sale or a voucher code or cashback or something like that, the prices are fairly consistent. So yeah, these are £259 for the pair. These are 5.5-inch bookshelf speakers, and they've got a frequency response of 62Hz to up to 25,000Hz in a free field environment they call it, so I think that means like outside and wide open. And they state that in a room, that'll go down to 40Hz and go up to 30,000Hz or 30 kHz. So that's really good range. That's essentially, you could just use these without a subwoofer and still get a really good experience. And that's what I'm aiming for. I want to rely on the subwoofer a lot less for just general music listening. So let's take these out. These are available in a bunch of different colours. You can get just totally plain white, totally plain black. You can also get sort of wood effects and stuff like that. I've gone for one of the wood effect ones. It's called Urban Grey they call it, which looks really nice. So it's white on the front, but it's got a sort of grey wood effect on the back, which looks really cool. It doesn't look like traditional wooden, but it just has a slight more interesting dimension to it than just being totally plain white. Oh, didn't cut that at all. Let's try and cut that again. There we go. Let's go in here. So let's see what we get. And also I'm going to go into a lot of detail here, but we can just skip through these if you're not interested. So what do we get with these speakers? We get a manual, get an Allen key, which I presume will be for the screw that mounts it onto brackets, and a set of rubber feet, because obviously you can wall mount these, which is what I'll be doing, or you can stand mount them. So if you're stand mounting them, you might want to put the rubber feet on, and if you're wall mounting them, you won't want the rubber feet. So it's nice to see they're optional, and safety instructions for speakers, which I presume just say, don't listen to them too loud, you'll damage your hearing, whatever. Now, next up you get what look like just foamy cylinders. I mean, that's what they are. These are to sort of gum up the bass port on the back. They've got a port on the rear of them, and you, in some scenarios, I think if you're installing it really close to a wall, for example, you may want to plug that port, and that's what these will be for. I'm not sure if I'll need these, but it means I've got them and I can try them. I'll try with them without and see how I feel, really. I'll need to read up on more on how they work. Next, we've got some polystyrene. Get these out. It's good to see the speakers are well packaged and they're not taking up the whole box, mainly because the box is very big and I didn't want the speakers to be that big, but they look an okay size. So let's unpack these. I'll take this one out and then I'll get rid of the others, but there's another box of accessories. That'll be the speaker grills. We'll take a look at that later. But what I'll do is I'll get this out of the way because we only need to look at one of these. And then we'll look at the one speaker. So now here we've got the first speaker, so let's unpack this. It's in a sort of foam bag thing. I'm really interested to see what this urban grey colour looks like in real life. Hopefully it looks as good as it looked in the picture, and yes, it does. So that's it there. Get out of the way. And that's it there. And that looks really nice. So here we have the speaker and we can see the finish. And I absolutely love how this looks. Because it is wood, but because it's grey, it looks subtle. It doesn't look like it's pretending to be wood. And this will look really good because in my room, I don't have white walls. They're sort of off-white grey colour wall. And if I put white speakers on that, they'd stand out really brightly. So having something that's a bit more subtle will look really good. And while I don't have much wood in the room, I do have some sort of grey furniture, and if I went for like something that was a wood style, it would be more like this colour. So that will look absolutely fantastic. On the front of the speaker, we can see we have the tweeter here, and then the main mid-range and bass driver down here. And as you can see, they're fully exposed. However, in the box, you also get a grill. You get one for each speaker. You take this out, I'll show you how this works. You get these grey grills here, look fairly nice, and these magnetically clip to the front of the speaker. So if you don't want to see the exposed cones, or if you've got, for example, kids running around or something like that and you don't want them touching it and playing with it, you can put that on the front. But because it's magnetic, it comes off and there's no mounting holes. Because I quite like having speakers, especially my front speakers, especially when they're sort of stylish, I quite like being able to see the cones and have them fully exposed. But with a lot of speakers, they have the little push pin holes where the front cover clips in. So when you take the front off, you've got those holes there and it looks like something's missing. You can tell there should be something on there and it's not. And that's the issue with my current speakers because the covers are actually missing from those. But with this, because it's magnetic, you can take it off and it looks totally fine. Or you can clip it on and it covers it up. So that is a really nice touch, just being able to take that off and have it look totally normal. Other than that, the whole finish and build quality looks excellent. It just feels really smooth, just looks fantastic. Fairly understated design, just fairly plain front. You can see the tweeter is gold, so that's a nice little touch. It does sort of shine through. And you've got the Monitor Audio logo down the bottom here. Now taking a look around the back of the speaker, we can see they've actually finished the back in the same wood style. That's good, I thought that would just be white in here. But we can see we've got the bass port here, which you could plug if you wanted to with those plugs. You've got a screw thread for mounting it on a bracket, which I'll be using. But annoyingly, there isn't a screw in there, which seems quite surprising because the bag of accessories actually includes an Allen key, so I can't see why you'd include an Allen key if there's not screws that it's meant to fit into. So that doesn't really make much sense. I can't actually find those screws. I'll try and tear the whole box apart and see if I can find them. I've not seen them. So that might be a bit annoying if it doesn't include a screw. You might need to try and supply your own, or it's just missing from my one. Then down here you've got the binding posts. Now what's cool with these is you'll see there's two sets. That's because these are bi-wireable. So you can see here there's an HF set and an LF set. This will be for the tweeter, this will be for the woofer and mid-range driver. Now by default, they've got these quite nice, really thick bus bar sort of metal plates in there. They'll link the two together. So all you actually need to do is connect one of them and then it'll link to both. But what you can do is if you want to, instead of doing that, if you want to wire them independently to your amplifier through a separate crossover and connect both drivers independently, you can take these out here, remove the metal plate, and then wire them independently. So that's really nice to see. Now in my setup, I'm connecting this up to an AV receiver, which obviously doesn't have that sort of capability. So I'm just going to be wiring like that directly in. And now these are just standard binding posts, so of course you can just loosen them off, stick a wire in and tighten it up. Or you can do what I tend to prefer, where you can pull this little plug out on the end, which is always a little bit tricky to get out. Probably need pliers to pull that out. But you can pull that plug on the end out and then put a banana plug in instead. Now I did a bit of digging to work out what this screw thread is, because I tried an M5 machine screw and it was too small, and an M6 was too tight. And now annoyingly, in the manual for the speaker, they don't state anywhere what this is. But they did state that you can buy the optional fixed M bracket for mounting for monitor audio. So that's a bit cynical side of me, says they're kind of encouraging you to buy the bracket. But I do wonder if this is actually meant to include the screws and they just genuinely forgot. But the fixed M documentation states that it provides a 1/4 inch, 20 threads per inch UNC thread, which isn't something I'd heard of before, but it turns out this is an imperial measurement of screw threads. This is really annoying because Monitor Audio is a British brand, and in the UK, for screw threads at least, we use metric. So this, in my mind, should be either an M5 or an M6 bolt, and my old Mordaunt short speakers, they use an M6 bolt. However, I did a bit of digging again, and it turns out the 1/4 inch, 20 threads per inch UNC thread is the same screw thread as used on camera tripods. So in the end, which that kind of makes sense for mounting something, but it is a little bit annoying. But I was able to find this lying around. Now this is the tripod mount I use for my camera gimbal, and I've actually got two of these. It came with a spare one for some reason. And as you can see, if we screw this into the back of the speaker, that fits perfectly fine. And it's actually quite nice because it's got a little handle, you can do it almost without a screwdriver. So that's mounting it absolutely fine. So I think what I'll end up doing is I'll probably just use these to mount it and then order another set of these for my gimbal because they're quite cheap. You can get, if you just look up camera tripod screw or something, you can find these on eBay for a few quid for a pack of 2. So it's not the end of the world. And if you are trying to buy these, looking up things like camera tripod screw might be easier to find than trying to look up that 1/4 inch, 20 threads per inch notation. But I do wish it included it, and I do wonder if they're meant to include these, or if it's genuinely just that they don't include them and you're meant to try and find them on your own, or buy their £40 bracket. But anyway, at least I found a way to mount it for now. I'll just have to nick these off my gimbal, and then I'll go and buy proper screws later. Next up we have the Bronze C150, and this will be the centre speaker. This retails for around about £175 and is available in the same colours as the Bronze 50s. Monitor Audio claims it has a frequency response in a free field environment of 83 Hz up to 25 kHz, and in a room environment it can go down to 66 Hz and up to 30 kHz. So it's not quite doesn't go quite as low as the Bronze 50s, possibly due to the lack of the bass port, but other than that it's basically identical to the Bronze 50. It has the same sort of 5.5 inch drivers and all that sort of stuff, just not quite as lowest frequency. But it's not as big a deal because the centre speaker is mostly just dialogue, which is well within that range. So it says open this end, so let's open it up. I also quite like this on the box where it says useless if dropped. Yes. Let's cut this open and we'll take a look at it. Cool, so let's open that up. And we've got some foam. Let's see how it gets out. Oh, should have probably turned that the other way up, but now we've got a set of some accessories, which we'll take a quick look at. This might just be the grill again. Yep, you've just got the grill in this box, nothing fancy at all. And then we've got the speaker, so let's carefully slide that out. Is there anything else in here? Yep, little bag of accessories at the other end. So So as you can see, we again get some rubber feet and an Allen key, presumably for the non-included screws, unless this comes with them. So let's take a look at the speaker. So again, we've got this here. How do we get this out? Tape on this side, I presume. And then do this side. And presumably just slide it out. And there we go. There is the C150. That is really heavy and really big. But yeah, that's it there. So now let's take a closer look. So now here we have the bronze C150. And like the bronze 50s, this looks excellent. It's got the same grey, urban grey colour on top, which looks great. And then the same sort of white on the front. And again, it just looks really classy. This time you've got the two 5.5-inch drivers. And then you've got the centre tweeter, and this will be handling all your dialogue. And yeah, it looks really, really good. Now let's turn around and take a look at the back. It's really heavy, and it is really tall. It's a lot taller than my old centre speaker. So that means I'm going to have to probably move the bracket it's on, because I set this on a sort of like shelf style bracket, and that's probably not going to hit my TV, so I'll have to move it. Here we can see around the back, we've got some silica gel, interestingly screwed into the mounting posts, so that's like, they've actually taken the time to screw that in. Interesting, they've actually, used that cost there to do it. And like before, you've got the same setup where you've got the high frequency and low frequency binding posts connected with these bus bars that you can take out. So you can either connect up just normally, or you can remove these bus bars and wire the two sets of drivers independently. Now around the back, I also saw these two screws that fit the included Allen key. So I thought, that'll do. I can take these out and use these on the other speakers, because I'm not going to be using these to mount this speaker. But bizarrely, these screws aren't actually for wall mounting it. And when you take them out, the drivers start coming out. You loosen these off and the two mid-range bass drivers start coming out the front of the speaker. So I've tightened them up again and put it all back together because I don't want to dismantle it. So I guess that must be how it comes apart. These must come out. In that case, I don't see how the other one comes apart, because there's none of these on the back. But that's a bit weird. So these are not actually for wall mounting it. These actually dismantle the speaker, so I've very carefully tightened those again. And that is annoying, because it now means I don't have screws to fit the other speakers, because I thought I could have nicked them off this. But anyway, yeah, these are not for wall mounting it, don't get confused. These are just for actually physically holding it together. So if you want to wall mount this, you'll have to do what I'm doing and sit it on some sort of shelf style type bracket. And now as with the bronze 50s, you've got the same style of grill, so you can clip that on magnetically like you do on the other one, and it clips on the front. But this time the only real difference is that it covers the monitor audio logo just due to its shape. So there's another badge on here. And again, that looks quite nice with that on. But for me, I think personally I prefer it without it, so I'll take it off. Finally, we've got the Bronze FX, which is what I'll be using as my surround channels. This is what they do as a surround speaker, and it has two tweeters and one woofer, and they're arranged in such a way to provide quite a wide dispersion pattern, which should hopefully mean that I shouldn't hear where the speaker is behind me. I was toying between this and one of their Atmos upfirers, which you can also mount on the wall firing down, which might have looked a bit more discreet and subtle, but that's a monopole speaker, so it might be a bit too directional. So I decided to go for this. This retails at around about £300, and it's available in black and white. So you can't get it in that nice grey colour, it's only black or white with a grey or black grille. But that's fine, because this is behind me, I want it to be a bit more subtle, it's going to be sitting on the wall, so white should be quite nice, just to keep it a bit hidden out of the way. And they're a bit lower profile, so they won't stand out as much. Monitor Audio claim that in a free field environment, this has a frequency response of 88 Hz to 25 kHz, and in an in-room environment, it has a frequency response of 74 Hz to 30 kHz. So again, it's not as much as the front speakers, but again, this is a rear speaker, it's mostly going to be doing sound effects, so that is perfectly good. That is a lot better than the vast majority of satellite speakers you'll get. So it's still really good to see that. So let's take a look. Particularly like the useless if dropped again, but yeah, something's happened here. But the packaging of the other ones has been good, so hopefully this will actually be intact. And this was really expensive, like this is the most expensive set of speakers out of the lot. but hopefully this will be good. It should just look really nice sitting on the wall and be a lot more subtle than just having big bookshelf speakers behind me. Because the problem is where I've got one of them located is right around the corner from the door. So if you walk into the room and turn the corner too tightly, you can quite easily bang your shoulder on the speaker. So these will be a lot more discreet. So let's pop this open. And we get the same accessory bag as before. I'm starting to suspect this accessory baggage is the same for all the speakers. You get an Allen key and some feet. And I actually looked up what that screw was on the center speaker. They actually state that is designed to remove the driver, and I think this has the same one. So I think they supply the Allen key for that, not for wall mounting it. Next up, we get the polystyrene. Let's take it out again. Come on, there we go. Oh, that's with a bit of cardboard. Oh, that's cool. So what you get with this is you get a mounting template. That's really good, because what you'll see when we take this out later is to mount this, it uses like keyhole openings. So you've got a keyhole opening like that you screw a screw into the wall and hook the speaker on. And I was worried about this because I've tried to mount things with these sort of fixings before, and when you don't have a template, it's an absolute nightmare because you can never get them to quite line up. So having a proper template here will be really good because that'll make it a lot easier for me to mount this. That's a really nice touch to include. Finally got the two speakers, so we'll take one of these out and then we'll just look at the other one later. So that's one of the speakers there. Get that box out of the way. Let's take a look at it. So here's the speaker, let's unpack it. So turn it upside down. Take the tape off to see what we get. And there we go. It's bigger than I thought it would be, but that does look really nice, and that'll look really slick on the wall because it'll sit flush to the wall, it angles out nicely, so it'll definitely blend in a lot more than having a big bookshelf hanging off an arm. This comes with the grille pre-installed. I think with these, yeah, the grille isn't magnetic on these, so if you take the grille off, it does leave the little mounting holes where it came from, but that's fine. I'm probably going to leave the grille on this anyway because I don't really want to look at these speakers. I want them to sort of be a bit more hidden behind me. And then on this grille, you've got the Monitor Audio logo again. I'll pop these off to take a look behind. And what we can see is once again, we've got a 5.5 inch mid-range and bass driver, and a pair of tweeters, one on either side. And again, there's that nice gold style, but you will cover that generally because you can see the issue without having those magnetic covers. You can very much see the holes and it does look like the cover's missing, whereas in the other ones it looks fairly intentional. And also just silly things like there's no logo printed on this if you take the covers off, whereas in the other ones you do have that. So yeah, now if we take a look in the back of this, we can see what we've got. Now, on the back you've got the two mounting posts to put a screw into. Those do look, my only concern is those do look quite tight holes, quite small. So I might need, the screws I was planning on using for this might not actually fit, they might be too small to fit through that hole. In fact, yeah, they will be, so I'll need to maybe go and find different screws for that. But yep, that's how you mount it on. You just need to put two screws in using that template and just hook it on. So that should be quite easy to do. Got another big screw in the middle there, but like the center speaker, I'm pretty sure that removes the driver. And then finally down the bottom, we've got the two binding posts and an interesting switch we'll take a look at. So here at the bottom, we can see we've got two binding posts, which is the same as before. You can screw them out to stick a wire in, or you can pull those little plugs out and put banana plugs in, which I'll probably be doing. I do prefer using banana plugs, but I suspect this might sit too flush to the wall to fit them in because they might stick out a little bit too much. So on this one, I might have to take the banana plugs off the wires and just wire them in, but that's okay. Now, one thing you'll spot with these that you won't have seen with the other speakers is that there's a switch, and it also is labelled left. They're labelled left and right independently. And these are related. With this sort of speaker, there's three main types: monopole, dipole, and bipole. A monopole speaker is like we've looked at before. It's just got a set of drivers all pointing in the same direction towards the listener. However, a speaker like this, you can see has two tweeters, one pointing this way, one pointing this way, and they face opposite each other. We just won't talk about the main driver in this. This is just not included in the bipole-dipole configuration here, but we're talking about the tweeters here. These can be wired in two different ways. If they're wired in a bipole configuration, that's the simplest to think of. They both just work exactly the same as each other. They're wired in phase. This means that when this cone pushes out, this cone pushes out, and when this cone pulls back in, this pulls back in. This just creates a very wide dispersion pattern around the speaker, and it just comes out all around it essentially. However, with these you can also switch them to a dipole configuration. What this does is it puts the drivers out of phase. This means that when this driver pushes out, this one pulls in, and when this one pushes out, this one pulls in. So they almost do the opposite of each other. And I'm trying to find information that clearly explains what the benefit of this is. Apparently it creates a null point around the listener if you're sitting directly in front, so I think you don't hear the sound coming directly from the speaker, but you maybe hear reflected sounds or something. I'm not 100% sure. But apparently if you can position this absolutely perfectly, a dipole configuration may be a different option for certain content, but I can't find any information saying which is better than the other. All I can really find is saying that if you have it in a dipole configuration, you definitely need to get the positioning absolutely correct. Now in my setup, I can position it very correctly. The position they're going in is pretty much ideal. So I might try dipole and see what I think, but bipole does seem a bit easier to work with. But I'll definitely try both, because with audio, the key thing is try everything and see what you prefer. Don't go, oh, this is the one true way to do it, this is the best way. Just try all these different options and see what you prefer. But because of this dipole configuration, where you've got the drivers out of phase, that's why they're labelled left and right. Because if you've got one on the opposite walls, you want the drivers, you don't want them all totally out of phase. You want to try and essentially just get them so you have left and right the right way around. So if you're using dipole, the out of phase drivers are on the same side of the speaker as each other. Probably explained that really badly, but that's why this is labelled left and right, is just for the dipole configuration. If you're using it as bipole, you probably won't need to worry about left and right, but you may as well do it correctly. But yeah, that's the Bronze FX. So there you go, that's all the speakers unboxed. So what I'll now do is I'll go through to the other room, dismantle the old setup, set all these new speakers up, then I'll come back with my whole opinion of how they all sound. So there we go. It's now a couple of weeks later and I've got the speakers installed. And these things look absolutely excellent. They are a lot bigger than the old ones and a bit bigger than I expected, so they do stand out quite a bit and dominate the room, but they're really, really good. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at the ones that I've got installed at the front here, as well as the surround ones I've got installed behind me. Take a look at how they're all mounted, then I'll talk about how they sound. So the first speakers we'll take a look at are the Bronze 50s I've installed as my front, left and right channels. And these look amazing. I absolutely love this urban grey colour. It just looks really smart. It's just a lot more interesting to look at than a plain white speaker, but doesn't look old-fashioned or traditional like a more red or brown coloured wood effect. It just looks really modern, but really nice. As for the mounts, I'd have loved to have something that's screwed into the back, but I just couldn't find anything that would be strong enough. Apart from the Monitor Audio Fix M system that costs £40 a speaker, and that's just way too expensive. After all the faff of the screw I was talking about before, I'd initially planned to use my existing mounts, which were just basic plastic things that screwed onto the wall and put a screw into the back of the speaker. But these were just too heavy. They're too heavy and they sit too far from the wall, and it just meant the original bracket would just sag down. So in the end, I decided just to cave and buy these sort of clamp arm brackets, which aren't the most attractive things. They're a little bit chunky, but they're really secure. So now to mount this on the wall, it's a bit tricky because I can't really go into the timber here because I have to have the speakers equidistant from the side walls, and the timbers just don't line up. If I was to go into the timber, the speakers would look off centre in the room and it would just look really stupid. So instead what I went for is I used some plasterboard spring toggles, used 4 absolutely massive ones, and fixed it onto the wall with these. It seems perfectly secure, and they are apparently rated up to 20 kilograms, and these speakers are only about 5 or 6, and then I've got 4 of them in, so yeah, using those toggles seemed absolutely fine. And while the brackets are a little bit chunky, they're not too bad. So yeah, a bit heavier than expected, so I couldn't use the original bracket I planned, but these new brackets work fine, and they don't look too bad. And the speakers look excellent. As for the connections for these front speakers, I'm just doing exactly what I did previously, where I've got the wire coming out the wall, that goes into a pair of banana plugs, and they plug straight into the back of the speaker. I could have just taken the bare wires and put them into the binding posts, but I prefer having banana plugs because I can easily plug them in and unplug them, and it's just a bit less fiddly, and just feel it's a bit more of a neater look. But yeah, that's what I've got there. You can also see the bracket mounted on the wall, which isn't the most ugly thing in the world. It's a little bit bulky, but it's not too bad. Next up, we've got the C150 centre speaker. And I'm just using the mount I had before, which is just these 2 metal arms that stick out from the wall, and the speaker sits on them. and I put the rubber feet on to hold it secure, and it works fine. I might replace these arms with like metal with white ones or something, just because the black does stand out a bit, but it does the job. The only issue I really had with this was that when I first set it up, I plugged the banana plugs in the back in the same way that I'm using them for the front speakers, the Bronze 50s. Plugged the banana plugs in and put it back, and it stuck out miles from the wall. Because if you look around the back, you'll see on this, the banana plug posts stick straight out, they don't sort of angle. So when it's sitting with banana plugs sticking out, to have them sit away from the wall, the speaker sat miles out into the room, and it looked huge. It totally dominated the room. So what I ended up doing was just taking the banana plugs off and wiring this wire straight into the binding posts, which I don't like as much, but it meant I could push the speaker right back against the wall. And even just moving it back that tiny little extra distance, that totally changed the look of it. It made it look a lot less big and dominate the room a lot less. I think because it meant it then sunk under the TV, so it didn't sit out way proud of the TV. So that's one downside with this, is that those binding posts stick straight out if you're using banana plugs. They're not angled. If they were angled, that would be a lot better. But as long as you're aware of that, and you might just have to put the wires in instead of using banana plugs, these work really well. Or suppose if you could deal with a little bit of additional depth, you could get right angled banana plugs, so that would be another option. Finally, I've got the surrounds. And I think these things look absolutely excellent. Compared to my old setup where I just had a speaker physically hanging off the wall on a sort of bracket, this is just a lot neater, because even though it's big, it's a lot bigger than my old speaker. It sits a lot flatter to the wall, it doesn't stick out, and especially when you walk around this corner coming in from the door, you're much less likely to bang your shoulder on it. And if you do, it can take it. It's not like a speaker sticking out from the wall that will wobble. And it does just look really neat. Now, in order to mount these, I've actually come up with something that I'm quite proud of. As with the other speakers, I can't really mount these into the stud work. Again, there's just no studs that really line up here. This is right in the gap between two. And these need to be positioned quite precisely. So if I was to put it on the stud, it would have to sit right over here, and then that would be out of position from where I sit. Additionally, with something like this, you can't really mount it into stud work unless you've got a horizontal stud that goes at the exact height, because you've got the mount at either side. So even if you had one bit of wood, you would still have the other bit having to go into the plasterboard. And as you've seen before with these, they've got those keyhole style mounts. So they essentially need to hook onto a screw. Now with these, I initially just considered using those like self-drilling roll plugs, and those would have probably worked, but my fear would have been that the weight of this is quite heavy, could have just pulled away from the wall. I've used the self-drilling roll plugs for my old speakers, and they held up fine, but when taking them out to mount these, I noticed that a few of them had slowly been starting working their way out the wall, which means it's only a matter of time before they would have fallen off. So I thought I would do something a lot more secure for these. So let's take a look at what I did. So let's quickly take a look at how I've mounted these, because I'm quite proud of the system. Like with the front speakers, I decided to use spring toggles because these are really secure, quite cheap, and they work really well. And what you do with these is you push them, you squeeze them like that, drill a hole in the wall big enough for that to fit through, poke it in, once it's in the wall it springs out, and then when you tighten the screw up, this gets brought closer and it clamps against the wall. However, as you can see with this wouldn't work with like these types of speakers because the speaker needs to hook onto this. But if you were to tighten this into the wall, all that will happen is this screw will just fall straight through the wall. It's not got anything on the outside of the wall. So I decided to use a couple of washers and a nut. So this is an M3 screw, so I've used an M3 nut. And what I ended up doing is this. So you take that off, put the nut on first, which is an M3 nut for the M3 screw, so they're the same size. Screw that on there. Just get that all the way down. Took a little while doing this, but it's worth it. And then what you can do is you can position this nut so it's at the end of the screw, but leave a slight slot here so that the speaker can hook in here, like that. Now, when you screw it onto the wall, this may end up coming right up to the end, but if it does that, what I found is just actually holding the nut with a pair of pliers and loosening the screw off, that sorted it and gave a little gap there. But once you've got that with a little gap there, then all I did was put on a smaller washer, which is an actual M3 washer, and then a larger washer, just to space it out even more. And then I put the spring toggle on itself, like that. So this is the final assembly I've used. I drilled a hole in the wall, big enough for that to fit through. I think it was about an 8mm hole. That then springs open inside the wall. This washer, this bigger washer, is bigger than the hole in the wall, so that then clamps on the outside of the wall. So you tighten it all the way up, The wall then, if essentially imagine the wall gets clamped in the middle here, this is holding it on the inside, this washer is holding it on the outside, and it leaves this little nub sitting out the wall with a little slot here that the speaker can hook onto. So let's go and see what this looks like in practice. So now with that spring toggle assembly pushed into the wall, what that then gives is this, which is really neat. It gives you a little washer, and then it has a screw sticking out on top, and that screw sticking out has a little gap behind it, and that's enough to hook the speaker over. And this was an absolutely fantastic setup, because the problem with those keyholes is that you've got to get the screws really precise. If they're not precisely spaced apart, they simply won't line up, and you'll end up fighting to get it on, and you'll never get it quite right. Or if you put the screws up and they're not perfectly level, there's no way to adjust that, it's just not going to be level. So doing this with these spring toggles really helped, because essentially what you've got is you've got a hole in the wall that's large enough to fit the whole spring toggle through, so it's quite a bit wider than the screw. The spring toggle is then pushed in, clamped against the wall, and holds this really tightly and securely. But if these aren't the exact correct distance apart or they're not quite level, all you need to do is loosen the screw off a tiny little bit, which means it clamps the wall less. You can then slide it around a little bit within its hole, tighten it up again, and clamp it tight in that new position. So these are actually quite adjustable. They're probably each adjustable maybe by about like 7mm or something side to side on each of them. And if you think about it with both of those together, that's a lot of adjustment for moving them closer together or further apart, or up and down. So what that's meant is I was able to put them in, then loosen them off, tighten them up, shift them around slightly, and get it so that they fit perfectly into the back of the speaker, and they're perfectly level. So to put the speaker on, I just hook it on and it instantly goes over these. There's no fiddling or angling and trying to get it on. It just hooks straight on, and the speaker is perfectly level. So I'm very proud of that mounting mechanism. That worked absolutely brilliantly. And obviously, perfectly secure. I've got no issue with the weight on this at all. And then at the bottom of the speaker, I've just put the little rubber feet on it, just to keep it a little bit off the wall to stop it totally sinking back against the wall. The only downside with these speakers is, again, just with those binding posts, it's the same as a centre speaker. They stick out a little bit too much to use banana plugs, because when it sits flat against the wall, the banana plugs hit the wall. So instead what I've had to do is just take the banana plugs off and just again stick the bare wires into the back of the speaker, which is a bit annoying because I've actually had to unwire these to take the speaker off the wall to film this because I can't just quickly unplug it. But it works. It's just worth bearing in mind again with these. It's got the binding post that you can put banana plugs in, but because it has to sit flush against the wall, if you've got straight banana plugs, they'll sit out and press against the wall and the speaker sticks up, so you need to really take them off and put the bare wires in. But yeah, I really like how these speakers mount. I'm definitely quite happy with this little mechanism I came up with. So that was a look at how I've mounted them all. Now let's talk about how they sound. The answer is excellent. When I set these up, I've connected them all into my receiver, which is a Denon AVR X2400H, along with a sub, which is a BK Electronics that I looked at in the previous video. And then all I did is did the automatic calibration using the Odyssey microphone, did all the calibration, just to set it all up, and they sounded absolutely brilliant. The one thing I did play about with, however, was the crossover frequency. When I did the initial calibration, the receiver detected the front speakers as large, which means they're full range, and then that means it wouldn't send any sound from them to the sub. Any sound for the front speakers would always come out the front speakers, none of the bass would be sent off to the sub. I played about with some of the settings, and I found what sounded best was actually to set the front speakers to small and set them at a crossover frequency of 60 Hz. So even though those can go down to 40 Hz, I found it sounded quite a bit better to cap them at 60 Hz, so they play everything above 60 Hz, and anything below 60 is sent off to the sub. And doing that just meant that the front speakers were freed up a bit from producing a lot of the low frequencies. That gets carried by the sub, which is a lot better at it. And the front speaker just freed them up a bit more, and they sounded even better. So that's worth playing about with if you've got something like this. Is play about with the crossover frequency. Don't just trust the receiver and go, oh yeah, it says they're full range, use them as full range. Actually setting the crossover to 60 Hz on these made it sound a lot better. But these do sound excellent. They're really clear both in the lows, the mids and the highs, and they're all very distinct. So it's not like with a lot of tracks where like when you get music that's got a lot of highs, mids and lows at the same time, it all just mushes into one sort of mush. With this, you actually clearly hear the bass and you separately hear the highs, and it's all spread out. It sounds fantastic. And there's actually been a few moments when I've been sitting like, not really focusing on the music, just sitting working on my laptop or whatever, and another track's come on, and I've actually looked over and gone, wow, because something just caught my attention because it's so clear. And there's a lot of music that I've listened to for years, and there's suddenly something I've just heard over these speakers that I've never heard before and realised, wait, that track's had that all along. I've just never heard it due to the equipment I was listening on. Whereas listening on these, I'm just hearing so much more information I've never heard before. So yeah, these are excellent. Now, as for the sound quality from these rear surround speakers, I'm very impressed. I'd never really put much effort into my surround speakers before because they don't really play much, it's just background sound, so I thought I'll just use basic bookshelves like I'd used before or whatever. But with these, the difference I've noticed is huge in terms of how directional they are, or more how not directional they are. As I mentioned when I was doing a tour of this earlier, I talked about the difference between monopole, bipole and dipole speakers. And my previous ones were just monopole, they were just basic bookshelf speakers that pointed directly at you. And if you did hear a sound coming from the rear speakers, or sort of sound that was meant to be behind you, it worked, it sounded like it was from behind you. But you could pinpoint the speaker, you knew it was coming from a single point. With this on the other hand, because it's got its two tweeters pointed opposite angles from each other, I've definitely noticed that when you hear a sound coming from behind you, obviously you can tell it's coming behind you from the left or the right, but it's a lot less pinpointed to an exact location, it's a lot more diverse. So that's definitely something I've noticed. This does sound really good as a surround speaker, just because it's quite hard to pinpoint exactly where the speaker is. And the sound quality is really good as well. As I mentioned earlier, these speakers have that switch that lets you change them between being bipole or dipole. I did play with that, and there was a slight difference, but I couldn't really say one was better than the other. So I think it really depends on just personal preference and the positioning in your room and how your room really sounds. I couldn't play with it too much because every time I changed it, I had to recalibrate the system to make sure it was definitely exact. It was just taking ages to switch between them. But yeah, there was a slight difference. And I did kind of get what they've said, where like it creates a null point around your head. But it wasn't like it was instantly better using one or the other. Try both, see what you prefer. But it's good to have that functionality so you can pick. So there you go. That was a look at my new home cinema speaker setup. And I absolutely love this thing. Yes, it was not cheap, but this has been well worth the money. And the sound quality improvement has been massive. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you're interested in buying any of these speakers, I've put links in the description. Unfortunately, I'm not sure how available they are outside the UK, but if you're in the UK or you can get these are an absolutely excellent option. So yeah, thank you very much for watching.